Hello, Alex here, and Harman Phoenix 200 is finally available in 120 medium format. Harman sent me a number of rolls to test and shoot before the launch and share my thoughts with them and with you. I wasn't really sure how to format this video given that I've talked about Phoenix in such technical detail in a number of my videos over the last year. So what I'm going to do is go through the last while that I've had this film, show you some of the pictures that I think are my favorites and are most representative, and help you just get the most out of it, which is especially important when you aren't getting as many pictures per roll. So let's get into it. Although Harman Photo did send me a number of rolls to make this video, they aren't sponsoring it, no money changed hands, and they don't get any creative input into how this video is made. The other thing is that I DSLR scan using a Fujifilm GFX 100S and the Veloy 360 setup. Phoenix is a bit sensitive to how you scan it, and DSLR scanning gets you the best possible quality, so my scans should be taken as examples of what can be achieved, but may not necessarily reflect what you will get. Of course, you can still get incredible results with lab scans, but it does rely on using the recommended scanning parameters that Harman and the Darkroom provided for the Fuji Frontier and Noritsu scanners. I just got home from work and there was something very exciting here waiting for me. Phoenix in 120. First roll or two, I'm going to shoot at 200 properly. Maybe try overexposing it after that, pulling it, doing other things. We'll see how that goes. I have a few trips planned for the summer, like Ackle Island, going down to Kerry for a bit. I probably won't be able to get a medium format camera into Green Day unless I bring the Holga. And I don't have enough rolls where I'd be happy throwing one in the Holga. Nuremberg, maybe I might bring a medium format camera there. Canada to Montreal to see Mark, absolutely. Probably start out with some like macro flowers and that kind of thing, because that's the kind of stuff I'm enjoying shooting with the Rollei. See if I can get some portraits on. Pride is coming up. I might be able to get a few pictures there. First released late last year in the 35mm format, Harman Phoenix 200 is the first film from the relatively new Harman Photo, a new company under the Harman technology brand, and it's a completely new, completely original colour film designed and manufactured completely from scratch in the Mobberley plant in the UK. We're talking about another new player in the relatively small colour film manufacturing market, and the importance of that really can't be understated. It is a highly experimental film, and Harman have been very open about its shortcomings. It's their first attempt at making a colour film, and they did it in less than a year. They've gone from just XP2, which is a chromogenic black and white C41 process film, to an actual colour film in 1 year, including manufacturing the film. That is absolutely ridiculous and a great achievement. Phoenix has high contrast, strong grain, limited dynamic range, and quite low exposure latitude for a negative film, and also lacks an anti-halation layer, so you get yellow to orangish halation in some scenes, and so on. It's entirely fair if it's not to your personal taste, but Phoenix has a very unique and distinctive look, and most other colour films can be made to look just about the same during the scanning process. Pro 400H, Portra 800, Kodak Color Plus, you can make those all look the same, but Phoenix definitely stands out for better or worse. But when scanned properly and shot properly, and in my personal opinion, when you pull it especially, shoot it at 100, pull it one stop in development, it can look absolutely beautiful. If you follow my channel, you know this is a film I'm quite passionate about, both because it's a good chemical exploration for me with my chemistry background, but also just because of what it represents. If there were any doubts about their commitment to the project, it was announced in July that Harman Technology secured funding for multi-million-pound investments into the expansion and modernisation of their production equipment. I mean, the fact that investors are willing to put money behind film photography in 2024, especially in the 6 to 7 figure kind of range, is absolutely fantastic for all of us. Obviously very excited to try out one of my favourite colour films in my Rolleiflex SL66. I shot my first couple of rolls at 200 and just around Dublin, in parks, at work, that kind of thing, just to get a feel for it and see how close it was to the 35mm format, see if anything had really changed. Surprisingly few people okay with having their portrait taken, but not what I expected at the Pride Parade, but that's the first roll done. Obviously I took a portrait of a swan, what do you expect? It's me. I have rarely seen the coating defects that Harman mentioned in the past from adapting their black and white production equipment to make colour film, which is understandable given the increased complexity of the structure with more and more layers, but to be fair, I've seen that happen 3 times across all my rolls of film, so it's hardly common. The box has a very similar design to the 35mm one, with that sort of dual texture with the glossy Phoenix on the outside, and the number of shots you'll get per roll will depend on the format of your camera. 15 or 16 for 645, 12 for 6x6, 10 for 6x7, 8 for 6x9, 4 for 6x17, and so on. The emulsion is coated onto a clear acetate base that has no anti-halation layer, as I mentioned, but also no orange mask. And this is a huge contributing factor to the high contrast this film has, as well as its sensitivity in scanning. When I finally made that trip I promised down to Kerry with Kieran, I shot my next roll at 140, so overexposing it half a stop. We normally think of the ISO scale as going 100, 125, 160, 200, but a lot of medium format cameras only have half stops at most. There are some cameras with stepless apertures, like a lot of TLRs, but the Rolleiflex and many other cameras can only do half stops. So I was technically exposing at 140 by metering for 200 and then opening the aperture by half a stop, because my meter doesn't have an ISO 140 setting. That is a bit pedantic, but you know, again, Phoenix has quite a low latitude and not all of us are blessed with a Mamiya 7 that has a nearly stepless auto exposure in 1/6 of a stop increments. When I developed and scanned those first few rolls, I saw everything that I had come to expect from Phoenix. Vivid colours that are gorgeous on a sunny day or under really good light, and even somehow look good on an overcast day, which is something I really struggle with. I really don't like colour film in overcast weather, it just doesn't appeal to me, but Phoenix tends to somehow look good. Limited exposure latitude, where overexposing or underexposing by more than maybe a stop to a stop and a half makes it difficult but not impossible to recover detail in post. You really do need to nail your exposure, Harman have said that since day one. Some halation, but less than in the 35mm format, kind of. Think about it, if it bleeds around your point light source by like 1mm, that 1mm is proportionally much smaller in a bigger negative. You know, it's a tiny spot versus the 35mm negative where it takes up a larger part of the frame, so the halation is there to the same extent, but it's less apparent. So to have it still be there, especially in extreme cases, but a bit more reined in, might appeal to some people quite a bit more. The clear base still leaves it a bit light leaky, just like in the 35mm format, so do be careful to keep the rolls tightly wound when you're loading and unloading your film. Don't load and unload in direct sunlight. And for the same reason as halation, the apparent grain and resolution are improved with the larger format for a given viewing size, as the grains or dye clouds are proportionally smaller in 120 than they are in 35mm. And lastly, just like in 35mm, I found the film to curl quite a lot when drying, bowing way more than any other film I've handled in the last while, except for a roll of like 20-year expired Portra 100T, but yeah, fair. The amount of detail in these photos isn't the highest I've ever seen in a medium format photograph, but it is so vastly improved from the 35mm format, and it really shows just how much benefit you can get from having a larger negative. It's the same idea as why Fomapan 100 is one of the best, not just most popular films in large format formats, because like in 4x5, yeah, sure the resolution isn't as high in lines per millimeter or whatever, but you're capturing a lot of millimeters in a 5-inch wide negative, and it's the same thing here. The bigger negative really has a lot of advantages, and grain and resolution are really the two biggest things that improve here. With a couple of normally shot rolls under my belt, I decided to start screwing around a bit, and if you follow my channel, you know that I love messing around with Phoenix. In the 35mm format, one of the biggest improvements I've seen, and that I recommend aggressively to anyone who will listen, is to pull Phoenix one stop. Shoot it at 100 and underdevelop it by one stop. This causes a huge reduction in both contrast and grain, and massively improves the shadow detail. So I wanted to try that in the 120 format as well, and I started a roll at one of our Ireland analog photo walks, and then later finished it in Germany, in Nuremberg, where I got to meet the one and only Karin Majoka. Karin is an absolutely amazing person and a photographer that I really look up to, so if by some miracle you don't know her channel already, please go check her stuff out.
While I was in Nuremberg, I was dual wielding two different magazines, with one roll to be shot at 100 and pulled, and another one at 200, just to have some kind of a comparison. And I met these American tourists who were like advertising their podcast or something. They were pretty chill, but either way I took their portraits, and if the YouTube compression doesn't completely destroy the quality, you should be able to see just how much of an effect pulling has on the grain, especially in the shadows. I shot a ton more stuff while I was in Nuremberg, especially with the 40mm on the Rolleiflex to capture sweeping landscapes and take advantage of that increased resolution of the larger negative, and I even tried shooting it under artificial lighting with surprisingly good results. At the time of recording, I've been told that the MSRP, the recommended retail price, is £10.99, €13.20 or $12 US, and obviously that will vary somewhat from retailer to retailer, but that's the only information I have at the moment, and that seems quite fair. It's slightly more expensive than Kodak Gold, but significantly less expensive than any other color film that I've seen that isn't Lomo Metropolis. So, in the realm of relatively normal color films, it's priced quite aggressively, which is something that I saw a lot of people complain about with Phoenix and 35mm, saying that, 13 to 14 euros was quite a lot to pay for an experimental film. Here, I think it's better enough from the larger format, as well as priced more aggressively within the 120 sphere, that it's a lot easier to justify. My last big trip with this film was when Kieran and I flew over to Canada to visit Mark in Montreal and go on a road trip around Quebec province, and I brought two rolls with me and decided to go a bit further with the experimentation with both of them. Mark. Mark. Mark, goddammit. The first roll was overdeveloped by +2 stops in development, but not rated at 800. It was technically rated at 560, metered in the same way as I mentioned earlier, because I found that when you push Phoenix 2 stops, you really only push from its true densitometric ISO of 126-ish up to about 500, and that's where I generally shoot it when I'm pushing. Shoot it at 500, overdevelop +2. So 560 was the closest that I could get here. Just like in the 35mm format, the grain is much coarser, and there's a bit of a color shift, and the shadow detail falls off quite a bit more rapidly. But again, the larger format does make the grain less apparent in your final images, and it kind of smooths out the contrast gradations, and let's be honest, this sunset photo here, there's no way you would have expected to get that much shadow detail from Phoenix, especially when pushing, and I was pleasantly surprised there. The other roll was shot at 140 and developed in the ECN2 cinema film process like you'd use for 250D and 500T. In the 35mm format, I found that this gave much finer grain, significantly higher acutance or perceived sharpness, and very minimal color shift. And that's basically what I saw here. Compared to C41, the grain is a bit finer, and acutance or perceived sharpness is again noticeably better, especially in the fine details. The colors are a smidge wonky in some of these photos, but for the sake of this video, I made no attempt to correct them just to show you what you can expect. In a very last minute addition to this video, I was recently offered a loan to try out a Fujifilm G617, a camera that shoots 6x17 format, shooting 4 images per roll of 120, and I had one roll of Phoenix left, so I knew what I had to do. With very limited time if I wanted to get this in this video, I decided to try a mix of night photography, architectural photography, and landscape photography. I actually bracketed the night photo because I wasn't sure if I was going to nail the exposure, and I actually did the first time around, so only 3 photos, but still. The amount of detail being captured here is absolutely ridiculous. The image quality is so vastly improved by using the larger negative. I mean, how big are any of us really printing nowadays anyway? Most of us are not printing bigger than, say, 11 by 14 inches if we are printing. I've certainly never printed anything bigger than 11 by 14, except for 2 panoramas that were, 20 inches wide? But that's still not that big. You're really taking advantage of the larger negative here to quash the apparent size of the grain in your images, but it's still not going to match the raw image quality of something like 250D. It is still Phoenix, but it's Phoenix in a better form. So yeah, we finally have Harman Phoenix 200 in 120 medium format, and it's not just better, it's actually good. The reduced appearance of halation and grain and the improved apparent resolution for a given viewing size, along with those finer contrast gradations all afforded by the larger format, kind of take the harsh edges off of some of Phoenix's limitations and make it a much more appealing and well-rounded option in the already extremely limited 120 color space. I mean, slide film you basically can't get apart from aerochrome. Color neg film, you've got gold, the 3 portraits, the 3 Lomos, Lomo 92. I think that's it, apart from the various gimmicky rebrands and then things like Aerocolor, 250D and 500T, which are repackaged stuff. whether it's from Cinestill, Reflex, or whoever else. So you really don't have a lot of options, and having another one, that alone is huge. It's the same thing as when gold came out in 200. It's fantastic. I think Harman have done a really good job here, and I think it was a really good move to finally release it in 120. I've been asking for that since day one. Still waiting for my box of 4x5 Phoenix though, whenever you want to get around to that. The next things I want to try with this are pulling it a stop in ECN2, not just shooting it normally. There wasn't quite enough light for me to do that handheld in Canada, and that roll was largely shot handheld. And also to see if I can get my slide project back up and running, because these results in 35mm are very good, but that project may be dead in the water.
And I still stand by what I've said for most of the last year. Whether you're going to develop in C41 or ECN2, for the best possible results, shoot it at 100 and pull it one stop in development. Yes, you can get great results with just overexposure, but pulling is really the secret sauce that gets the absolute most out of Harman Phoenix 200.
I want to give a huge thanks to the folks at Harman Photo for allowing me to test this film and help show you how to shoot it once again. Do check in with your lab to make sure they are using the recommended scanning parameters for their Frontier or Noritsu scanners to get the best possible results, which is extra important again when you're not getting as many shots per roll. Or if you have the opportunity, DSLR or flatbed scan. It makes a huge difference. Harman Phoenix is available right now from your local retailers, so I hope you found this video enjoyable. Stay safe, and bye-bye for now. If you don't already, follow me on Instagram at Shaka1277 for new pictures every day. If you liked this video and enjoy what I do on the channel, please consider subscribing or checking out my Patreon, where the tiers start at just €1 per month.